Welcome back. Welcome to the Conversation Corner. 250 years ago today, America's ragtag army of colonists suffered one of its most devastating and psychologically traumatic losses of the Revolutionary War. A piece for the Wall Street Journal historian Lindsay Chervinsky explains how the loss taught George Washington and the commanding general a pretty big lesson, which defined not only that strategy, but it offers us some hints about how we should think strategically going forward. And Lindsay Chervinsky joins me now. Battle of Brooklyn is what we call it.
Yes.
Why was it such a defeat, and what did George Washington learn?
Well, it was strategically a huge defeat because we ended up losing New York Harbor, which was one of the most valuable harbors at the time. It was a deep water port, still is today. Yeah. So that psychological impact was huge. But it also militarily was a huge defeat because over 1,000 soldiers, including some major generals, were killed or captured, which was not necessarily troops you wanted or were able to lose. And really only were able to escape it being much worse through a stroke of luck and a little bit of fate.
Stroke of luck and an intuition that Washington had that would enlarge his strategy going forward, that you didn't necessarily have to win every battle. You just had to survive for the next fight.
Yes, absolutely. So this was Washington's big takeaway from the war, which was that eventually he became aware of the fact that independence, or the cause for independence, would continue to survive as long as the army existed. And the army would exist as long as he existed. And so entering into a major frontal engagement was not necessarily the smartest tactic, even though that's what everyone in Europe had done for centuries. So he shifted his strategy going forward and always prioritized escape so that they could fight another day.
And how did he escape?
Well, this is, I think, perhaps his best escape of the entire war. And this is where, sometimes you think of history, and if you were to write it up as a movie script, I think the producers would say, no, that's not believable. So Washington ordered a retreat. They found every single boat or vessel or anything that floated, basically, and evacuated every single soldier, including many of the sick or wounded, across the water to the island of Manhattan. Washington was the last one on the boat, so the last one to escape. And this was only possible because a very unusual fog had come in and settled over the water. So the British patrol ships had kind of gone away, gone to harbor, and covered their escape. So without that fog, which is not a usual part of New York Harbor, this would have not happened.
And before the fog, there was a storm. Mm-hmm. And the storm also pushed or forced the British vessels back a bit farther. So it's one of the underappreciated aspects of war. War oftentimes, maybe not often, but sometimes crucially turns on weather.
Yes, it's such a huge part of
things that are variables.
Yes.
That you either take advantage of or are thwarted by.
Absolutely, especially when you have such a huge discrepancy in power. So the United States didn't have a navy. And so Britain completely controlled the entire harbor, and had the weather been good, they would have been positioned basically surrounding the American troops, and that escape wouldn't have been possible.
Also worth remembering, the British are well-trained, well-organized, well-disciplined. When I said ragtag, I didn't mean that as an insult. It's true.
Very accurate description.
Pulled from lots of different directions, not very well outfitted, not very well disciplined, especially at this stage of the early revolutionary fight for independence.
That's exactly right. So later on, the army does become more disciplined. Baron von Scheuben was a Prussian general who came over and really instilled good drilling in the army, but that was all still in the future. So at this point, most of the troops are incredibly green. They don't have a lot of battle experience. Most of the generals don't have a lot of battle experience, and so they're kind of all over the place.
And Washington, importantly, realizes that for him and for this army, success has to be measured differently, and he has to figure out a way to communicate that to the Continental Congress. Because things that look like defeats are not necessarily defeats, but they're often, in the moment, portrayed that way.
Well, that's right. And, this was, I think, a humbling realization for Washington, because honor was such an important part of military culture and really early American culture in general. And the idea that you wouldn't necessarily seek out the big victory that is, glorious and is going to bring you fame and prestige was hard for him to initially accept. And then he realized that, again, survival was essential. And so he started communicating to Congress in a way that explained why they had to retreat, explained why they had to give up New York City. And then he was also attentive to the flip side. So, of course, we're coming up on the 250th anniversary of crossing the Delaware, which is the famous big success at Trenton. Strategically, it's not that important. Tiny little baby battle. But morally, it was so important for both Congress and for the Army.
And for that Continental Congress to sustain the Army, which was a back and forth aggravating proposition throughout. Lindsay Chervinsky, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Quick reminder, The Takeout is available as a podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and everywhere else. You can find each show there. And of course, our long form interviews, of which I'm happy to say we do many.